Okay, guys, what are some things that annoy me? And this is no way meant to offend or cause issues. But one of my pet peeves is when someone identifies themselves as a social worker and you don't have any type of social work degree. You don't have a master's, you don't have a bachelor's. Like, you do social work things, which we appreciate. We appreciate that you are helping people, helping the community, giving back in that aspect. However, hot topic, okay? If you do not have any type of social work background, you don't have a degree, a bachelor's or a master's or a PhD, you cannot identify yourself as a social worker. And like I said, I appreciate the work that you do. I appreciate the spaces that you go in, the encounters that you have with the community, the partnerships that you create within the community so that your clients and patients can have access to that. I appreciate that, truly, like deeply appreciate that, because that work needs to be done, and I do that work and I contribute to it myself. However, you're not a social worker. Okay? My first job, although I was a social worker, I had my bachelor's in social work, the job title was not social worker. It was like family service worker or something like that. Because there were other people that were on the team that did not have a social work degree and didn't plan on having a social work degree. But it still allowed the flexibility to do social work things, like getting patients, families access to resources and assisting with application and making DCS referrals and all the things like under the umbrella. But if you don't have, I'm gonna say it again for the people in the back, okay? Because it does create miscommunication, misinformation, I think is what I'm trying to say. As far as like, yeah, I met with a social worker, but they weren't really a social worker. And then when you actually meet with a social worker, you're like, they didn't do that because it might have been a caseworker, affiliated with that agency, but they just allowed you to refer to them as a social worker or identify themselves as a social worker in order to not like necessarily go into like the explanation of their job. And so it just like possibly felt easier to do that. I say all that to say is that I really hope that we have title protection in the next several years, and that is something that is like very firm. And I want you to think of it in the way that I think of it, is that like a lot of other positions, you don't call yourself that if you don't have a specific degree associated with it or licensing associated with that. So like medical assistants don't refer to themselves as nurses, and nurses don't refer to themselves as nurse practitioners. You have to have a specific type of training, certification, licensing in order to be able to practice in that specific way. And that should be applied to social work. It should be. However, people use it however they want. And so I just want that to be like known. And like even within like the medical field, because I work in the medical field, like, yes, they're all doctors, right? However, they're very specific on identifying themselves with their specific specialty. Because if you have a doctor who is working mostly in cardiology and they do heart transplants and such like that, could they help you deliver your baby? They probably could, because they've had some type of exposure to that. Just like people in the community who do social work things, you have some type of exposure to the scope of what social work is. However, you don't identify yourself as a labor and delivery doctor if you work on hearts or bones or the brain, All right. So yeah, that's my little rant. And I thought I saw something on like the ASWB site about like that being something that is acknowledged this month for the year of 2025. And if anybody else feels the same way, let me know, because I know that a lot of my other friends feel the same way, because I work hard for my degrees. I worked hard for my licensing, and I'm in supervision now to be an LCSW. And I just want there to be a level of respect for the social work profession. And I think that that also will play a hand in how we're compensated. Because if people are just coming off because they like, this is a good job, or I've always wanted to help in this kind of way, I think that that's also reflected in the pay. Because if someone else can do most of the work, which also like social work needs to be better defined and understood universally, and specifically in the United States of America, because that's where I live. I think that that could create a lot of like positive change with expectations with hiring, with expectations around pay and salary band increases and things of that nature, and also separate specific jobs so that those in those social work roles who are social workers, mixed in with caseworkers who, like I said, it's very much appreciated what you do and how you show up for the clientele that you have. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't do those things. I'm just saying that don't identify yourself as a social worker. If we have social workers and caseworkers doing the same thing and working really well together, they're not going to pay the social work necessarily much more because you have a degree. Like, there needs to be an understanding of kind of how far your practice, your interventions, services can go versus the clientele meeting with the caseworker. Like, what does social work bring that is different from everybody else around them? And yeah, like I said, that's my rant, my social work rant for the month. Thanks, Chelsea, for the shirt. And if you have any other hot topics, let me know, because I love talking about social work, and I love talking about like some of the things that like make me feel spicy about social work and or related type things. So let me know.